The first Beis HaMikdash, Chazal teaches, was destroyed because of the three cardinal sins: Gilui Arayis, sexual immorality, Shvichas Domim, murder, and Avodah Zarah. It says in Sfarim that these parallel the breakdown of three essential relationships which man has. The relationship between Adam leChavero, man and his fellow, between Adam leMokom, between man and Hashem, and Adam la'atzmo, a man and himself. Self-evidently, Avodah Zarah is the breakdown of the relationship between man and Hashem. Similarly, the ultimate breakdown of the relationship between man and his fellow is murder, Shvichas Damim. It's not so clear, though, why the breakdown of morality is paralleled to Adam bein Adam la'atzmo. I think the answer is that, in a sense, apart from the fact that it's an Isser in the Torah, when sexual immorality, especially as what they used to call in England between consenting adults in private, the law ran, really doesn't hurt anybody. It's not a breach of a relationship between God and man, a denial, a fundamental denial of the Ribbono Shel Olam. It's not murder. But what it does is, sexual immorality is really a denial, a nullification of the Tzuras HaAdam. A person is supposed to be, as we saw we talked last week about the Tzura, the ultimate Tzura of man is Avram Avinu. Elu Toros Shemayim Va'aretz Behiboram. These are the generations of heavens and earth, Behiboram, in their creation. Rearrange the letters of Behiboram, Be'avraham. That Hashem created the whole of the Shemayim and the Oretz, all the heavens, for someone like Abraham. Abraham was the Tzuras HaAdam, the picture of the way man is supposed to be. When a person loses that Tzura, he loses that elevation. That's a breakdown of the relationship between him and himself. He's not damaging anybody else. But in some fundamental way, he's lost, he's become less of a person, more physical, more physicalized, lower, closer to the animals. We live in a generation, in an era where things have got so out of hand. I mean, in my short lifetime, things have become to the point now where a person who wants to pursue a normal form of relationship is considered to be narrow-minded. And somebody who hasn't broken through, hasn't been porotz, all the natural gedarim, the natural barriers there are, is considered to be somebody who hasn't lived. It's got to the point where the normality that the Torah dictates is seen to be freakish. It's an upside-down world. Really, the world is turned upside down. I want to look at that in view of the Parsha. So maybe if you'll all take a Chumash. Sorry, I should have prepared you for that one. We're going to look at Bereishis, this week's Parsha, Yud Tes, Chaf Hey. Bereishis 1925. What page is it on? Somebody finds the page, let me know. Yud Tes, page 88. Says in the Pasuk, V'Hashem himtir al Sodom v'al Gomorrah, and Hashem rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah, Gofris, sulfur, v'eish, and fire, meis Hashem min hashamayim. The next pasuk, v'yahafoch, and Hashem overturned es ha'orim ha'el, these cities, v'eis ha'kikar, and the plain, v'eis kol yoshvei ha'orim, and all the dwellers of those cities, v'tzemach ha'adamah. Now there's something rather strange about this pasuk. Something which they call in English bathos. Bathos means a complete anticlimax. Look at the progression here. Vayavoch es ha'orim ha'el. Hashem overturned the cities. Wow. And then he overturned the whole plain. Hakikar, the whole plain. And then the human life, es kol yosh ve'orim, all of these, the dwellers of these cities, and the plant life, and the vegetation. Bit of a letdown. And also, what do I need to know that if I know the kikar was overturned? So one would assume the vegetation went along with the kikar. In the Esesphiros, the lowest of the Sphirot, the what they call emanations, is called Malchut, Malchus, kingship. Malchus is inextricably linked with something called kavod, honor. The ultimate kavod is to the king. And the reason why the lowest sphere is the sphere of Malchus is it's only in this world that Hashem's kavod can really be expressed. There are two kinds of kavod, two kinds of honor. There's an honor which is ordered, and there's an honor which is given willingly. If you think about it, an honor where somebody is forced to honor somebody is no kavod at all. It's the biggest anti-kavod. True kavod can only come from the ability, from the potential to withhold that honor, and then it's given. True honor can only come from a situation where it would be possible not to give that honor, and that is this world. This world is the world of hester, of concealment. We don't see Hashem in this world. The word olam in Hebrew, olam comes from the root of ne'elam, which means vanished or concealed. This world is specifically designed to conceal Hashem. And that's why the true kavod can only come from this world. The malachim, so to speak, are quote-unquote forced to honor Hashem. Not forced in any sense of force majeure, in the sense of that the hisgalus, the revelation of Hashem is so clear to them that they can do no other. So the kavod that they give is not a real kavod. Because again, kavod is the ability to withhold that kavod, and yet it's still given. Ki Hashem ha-melucha u'moshel bar-goyim, it says. Ki Hashem ha-melucha, that's the kingship is what we do on Rosh Hashanah. We are mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem is a moshel, he's a, if you like, a dictator. It's true Hashem, quote-unquote, he dominates the whole world. Nothing can happen without him. But the recognition, ein melech below Ummah, there's no king without a nation. The nation, to truly make a king, the nation is the one who places the crown on the head of the king. And that is kavod. Kavod is inextricably linked up with Malchus. Now we're going to discuss one more point first. Kavod is an essential part of life. A person Leman yizamercha chavod v'lo yidom. We say in the davening every morning. Leman yizamercha chavod, in order that the kavod should sing to you, should praise you. Now, kavod in this context is the nefesh. The nefesh of a person is called the kavod. And this has implications for being alive. Meaning, if you remove all kavod from somebody, if you take away somebody's honor, which is what the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, tried to do to the Jewish people, if you succeed in removing all self-respect from a person, that person will either die or go crazy. The nefesh is called the kavod, and of course, I'm not talking about honor seeking, I'm talking about self-respect. A person who has no kavod feels that he has no existence. The nefesh is leman yizamercha chavod. And it's interesting, if a person, Rahman al-Islam, does go insane, He'll believe himself to be not the shopkeeper down the road, not a bus driver. Who will he believe himself to be? Napoleon. He'll believe himself to be Julius Caesar. Meaning the reaction of removing all self-respect from a person, the madness that provokes if he doesn't die, will be to try and embrace the greatest kavod that can be. And interesting, just by the side as we were talking about the Malachim cannot give Hashem the way kavod, the way man can, because as I say, they are quote unquote compelled. One of the groups of angels is called Chayot. And Chayot v'achayos v'ofanim, Chayos HaKodesh v'ofanim, we say in the davening as well. The word Chayah means also something else in Hebrew. Anybody knows what the word Chayah means? Animal. A wild animal. Davka, Chayah. So what is the connection between a wild animal and an angel? The answer is that both a chayah and an angel have no freedom of choice, of freedom of will. An angel is so transfixed by the immanent presence of Hashem, his omnipresence. A malach sees that in a way that a human being doesn't. And on the other end of the scale, a chaya, a wild animal, also is, so to speak, transfixed by its instincts. It can do no other. An angel can do no other, a wild animal can do no other. Nobody's going to go into the jungle and arrest a tiger for killing a gazelle. That's its instinct. He can do no other. That's why they're both... Man, on the other hand, man is called a mahalech, literally a walker. Samta mahalchim beina omdim kan, says in the Pasuk. You have placed walkers amongst these omdim. Who are the omdim? The angels. The angels stand. They only have 1 foot. They can't move. They can't move out, they can't move down. Similarly with an animal. An animal can't move up, it can't move down. Man is the only creature who has the ability to move up and to move down. Man is the creature that is able to give kavod because he could choose to withhold it. I want to speak a little bit about David HaMelech, because David HaMelech is David HaMelech, Melech Israel. He is the Melech. He embodies Malchus. David HaMelech says about himself, Va'ani tefillah, I am the essence of prayer. And David is also called Na'im Zmirot Yisrael, which translates something like the sweet singer of Israel. It's well known David HaMelech would take his lyre, his harp, and soothe the savage breast of Shaul HaMelech when he was disturbed, when he was depressed. Excuse me. I want to try and bring together maybe these ideas of kingship, of music, and of course the one thing I didn't mention yet was Mashiach. The 3 M's: music, Malchus, and Mashiach. David HaMelech. Now David HaMelech, his journey, so to speak, his ancestry, David HaMelech, the king, starts off in a very, very strange place. Where does it start off? In this week's Parsha. In the incestuous relationship between Lot and his older daughter. From this union comes Moav. Moav literally means from father. Now, of course, let's just put this in parenthesis. The Torah ascribes no blame to the daughter of Lot for having relations with her father, because both daughters understood that the world was, I guess in our way of thinking, we would equate it to like a post-nuclear nuclear Holocaust. They saw after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah that they understood the whole world was destroyed and there was nobody else left. And therefore their actions were l'shem shamayim, because they understood that it was only from them would they be able to repopulate the world. So that has to be clear. But Moav, if you remember when the Klal Yisrael were coming out of Egypt, the Moavim were machshil. They caused the Jewish men to stumble by seducing them, and that caused a tremendous plague where tens of thousands died, the Jewish people. Moav, the gematria of Moav is Mem, 40, Vav is 6, 46, and Av, Aleph and Beis, is 3, 49. 49. There are Mem Tes Shari Tuma. There are 49 gates of impurity. As Chazal teaches, the Jewish people, when they were in Mitzrayim, they arrived at the 50th gate. There is no way back. 50 is something beyond this world. We count 48, 49 days from Paysach to Shavuos. We don't count the 50th day, because the 50th day is the day of Shavuos. 50 is always something which is beyond this world. 49, there are 49 gates of Tuma, and there are 49 gates of Bina, of supernal understanding. And Moshe Rabbeinu, that was the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. 49 is the extremity of the world. The Maharal in various places explains that the number 7 connotes this world. There are, in most cultures, 7 days in the week. There are 7 colors in the spectrum. There are 7 notes in the diatonic scale. 7 is always this world, and 8 is one step beyond this world. Therefore, Bris Milah, which raises the physical body to something beyond itself, is performed on the 8th day. That's why Chanukah has 8 days. If you want to find the ultimate extrapolation of any particular thing, you take it and you times it by itself. So the ultimate of this world, the most that this world can ever be, is 7 by 7. So Moav is Gematria 49. Moav is literally the pits. You can't go any lower. And that's where David HaMelech comes from, strangely enough. It says, V'gam, in this week's Parsha, you might want to look at it, 13, I think it's this week's Parsha, 13:8, Yud Gimel, Ches. Is it last week's Parsha? I didn't look it up. Last week's Parsha, okay. But the same, it's still talking about Lot. And it says, V'gam Lot, and also to Lot, HaHolech, as Avram, yes, who walked with Avram, Haya Tzon, Uvaka, V'oalim, tents. Now the Medrash says, Rabbi Tuvia ben Yitzchak Omar, Shnei Oalim, Rus HaMoaviyah, V'ne'ama HaAmonis. Now, tonight we're just going to deal with Rus. Who was Rus? Rus was the great-grandmother of David HaMelech. So it comes out that David HaMelech, where does David HaMelech come from? Omar Rabbi Yitzchak, it says in Tehillim, Motzatzi David Avdi. There's Tehillim Pei Tes. I have found David my servant. Heichem Motzasi, where did I find him? B'Sodom. David HaMelech, the king of Israel, the king, HaMelech, where does he come from? Moav, the lowest possible place. The Mem Tes Shari Tuma. How do we understand this? How can that be? The 2 Olim we spoke about in the Pasuk was Rus HaMoavis. Rus was the great grandmother. As we said before, David HaMelech, Chai v'Kayom. David is the hidden line of Mashiach that eventually emerges. Naim Zmiros Yisrael, the pleasing singer of Yisrael. At this point, I want to talk a little bit about music. The Klal Yisrael, it's learned out from Psukim, it's brought in the Medrash, Jewish people will experience four world historical exiles. Babylon, Paras for Modai, Persia and Modai, Media. Yavan, Greece, that's the story of Hanukkah. And the final exile is that of Rome. The Medrash learns that Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, when he had his dream of malachim, of angels, going up and down on a ladder, that these angels were actually the sarim, the spiritual guardians of the four great exiles. He saw the malach of Bovel rise up 70 rungs on the ladder, and then he came down. He saw the malach of Paras Umadai, Persia and Media, the story of Purim, go up 52 rungs and come down. The Jewish people were in exile 70 years in Babylon, 52 years in Persia, and then the exile of Greece, he saw the malach go up 180 rungs and then come down. And then he saw the malach of Rome going up and up and up and up and up and up, and he didn't seem to come down. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and the Medrash says that Yaakov Avinu became very frightened. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu said to Yaakov Avinu, using the words of the Haftorah, Im tagbia kenesher, if you will, speaking to Edom, speaking to Rome, Edom is Rome, if you will rise up like an eagle, v'beina kochavim tasim kinecha, and amongst the stars you will place your nest, or aridecha mishum Omar Hashem, something like that, not sure exact posik. I will bring you down even from there, says Hashem. This exile, the exile that we're in now, has gone on for much, much longer than the other three exiles. The Roman exile, Rashi says that the last of the kings of Edom, which is listed in the Chumash, Magdiel, says Rashi, hu Romi. Rome, if you remember your history class, Rome metamorphoses with the conversion of Constantine to Christianity to become the Holy Roman Empire, which my history teacher used to say it was neither Holy Roman or an empire. The Holy Roman Empire then basically divides into the Orthodox, the Eastern Church in the East, and the Catholic Church in the West, and what devolves from there basically is Western secular society, the power of the day. Edom now is to be found in the West. And Edom seems to keep going up and up and up. But even if he reaches up and he makes his nest upon the stars, as indeed in the last year of the 1960s he managed to do, he's going to be brought down even from there. That's the promise of Hashem. These four exiles Babylon started off, stole the Malchus from Klal Yisrael. They appropriated, they misappropriated, they stole the Melucha, the kingship from Klal Yisrael. And each one stole it from the one before it. Porus stole it from Bavel, Greece stole it from Persia, Rome stole it from Greece. And eventually they will be machzir, they will give it back to Klal Yisrael. The Sfarim say that's one of the reasons why the semel, the mark, the symbol of this fourth exile, the exile of Rome, is the pig. Why? Because the word in Hebrew for a pig is chazir, and the reason is because they will be machzir, the malchus to Klal Yisrael. And that's what we wait for daily. Now clearly, if they stole the melucha, they stole the kingship, and they stole everything, all the attributes of melucha as well. David HaMelech, who embodies, who encapsulates everything about melucha. David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'Kayom. So when they took that into captivity, they also took the music. I once asked Rav Moshe Shapiro Zeitung Livracha, what did the music of the Beis HaMikdash sound like? And he told me, and he said it's written in Sforim. I never managed to find out which sefer, but he said it's written in Sforim that when the Romans captured the Melucha, they took it from the Jewish people. They also took into slavery the music, and that music surfaced first of all in the antiphonal chants of the Roman Catholic Church. If you've ever heard, by the by, you may have the chanting of the Catholic Church, that is the basis of classical music, the basic structure of classical music. He said, if you want to know, it probably sounded most like classical music. In other words, that music is a function of kingship. It's part of kingship. It's part of the Melucha. And when they captured the Melucha, they took into captivity the kingship, they also took the music. Now, Rudyard Kipling, an English poet, who you may have learnt at school, once wrote, "East is east, and west is west, and never the twain shall meet." Well, I think this phrase was never more apt when applied to music. To the Western ear, the further east you travel, the less music sounds like music. And I'm sure the reverse is true. If you played Beethoven's Fifth to some Nepalese goat shepherd, I'm sure you'd find it pretty inscrutable. But one thing all music shares, all music, however dissonant it is to our ear, is that all music consists of a scale. However enigmatic as I thought that scale may be to the unfamiliar ear, every music in the world has its own scale, which is as rigid and immutable as our own scale. Now the word scale comes from the Italian, the Latin, scala. Scala means a ladder. It may seem obvious, but I want you to understand this. All ladders start at the bottom and end at the top. No ladder begins in the middle and goes up, or at the bottom and stops in the middle. All ladders connect the top to the bottom. And if you think about it, if you look into music a bit more, you'll realize that the connection of the high and the low, the bottom and the top, is not just what a scale does. A scale, the diatonic scale, any scale really, will always get to a point where the frequency, like let's say 440 A, 440 cycles a second, if you go up to 880, that'll be exactly one octave higher. This connection of the top and the bottom is not just from one note to another note, one scale, one octave to another octave, but within the note itself there is a connection of the top and the bottom. Let me give you an idea what I'm talking about. All notes are made up of waves, sound waves. The nature of a sound wave is always connects the top and the bottom. Meaning, if you, let's take for an example, a double bass, a string bass, a big bass like this, you can see it very clearly. When you pluck the note on a bass, the note doesn't just move to the left and come back to the center. It moves to the left and it goes through the center and it goes to the right. And it goes on its first swing almost as far as it goes, and it finally ends up in the center. But the note itself comprises the connecting of two extremities, left and right, up and down. If you look at a sine wave on an oscilloscope, you'll see it does this. The note itself connects the top and the bottom. The scale, the word scale, means a ladder, which, as we say, connects the top and the bottom. And there's also another connection of the top and the bottom in music, and that is as follows. Shared experience. I would suggest maybe that's the difference between the two words in English, empathy and sympathy. A person can sympathize with, Rahman al-Islam, a tragedy that happened to somebody else, but he can only empathize if, Hashem Yirachim, he had that same experience. It says in the deeper sources that music's roots are the medieval concept of the way the body was made up. Of course, even though we tend to laugh at their definitions, but really our definitions are just slightly less primitive than theirs. Nobody really understands the composition of the human mind and the human emotions. We have labels which become more sophisticated and maybe more accurate. But in the medieval concept of the composition of the body, there were things called humours, which were said to reside in the bile. So the aspect of a person which is called depression comes from black bile. The Sfarim say that the root of music is in the black bile. The root of music is in depression. How does one understand that? And the answer is what we've been saying up till now. How is it that music is able to lift somebody up? How can music raise somebody's spirit, quite literally? It's because music, so to speak, says, I've been there. I can empathize with you. The root of music is in depression. And because that's where its root is, therefore it can, at every single step in between, it can raise a person up. So music, what I'm trying to put across to you, is a combination of extremities. Of the scale, the note, one octave to another octave, the oscillations of the note itself from one extremity to another, and in the emotional scale from the top to the bottom. Now we can understand a little bit more about David HaMelech's lineage. David HaMelech starts off at the bottom and he ends up at the top. And that's his connection to music. He embodies music. He's the Naim Zemiris Yisrael. Let's understand a little bit in more detail the idea of a Jewish king. A Jewish king is totally different from the secular concept of monarchy. The secular model of kingship is that the nation serves the will and the whim of the king. They're for him. They're there for him. A Jewish king is the reverse. A Jewish king is to be meyached et ha'am, to unify the nation. He has to represent in one person the entire nation. He is Achad Ha'am. A king is called Achad Ha'am, the one of the nation. Any unity that lacks a part cannot be called a unity. For the king to unite the nation, he must connect every part of that nation from the top to the bottom. He has to unite, he has to embody the extremities. Even that 49th level of Tumah. The king, David HaMelech, has to come from Moab. The king must be able to connect the top to the bottom. That's who he is. He's the king. He's the Miyached et ha'am. Now, let's go back to I want to just add this here. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Ein ben David ba, Ben David, the son of David, who's that Mashiach, will not come, Ella b'dor shekula zakai or kula chayev. Ben David, Rabbi Yochanan says that the Mashiach will only come for a generation who are all zakai, or all meritorious, deserving, or who are all chayev, guilty. B'dor, how do we know this? From two Pesukim. B'dor shekula chayev, it says in Yeshayahu, V'amachu kulam tzadikim, la'olam yoshu aretz. And b'dor shekula chayev, dichsiv, it says in Yeshayahu, Vayerah, ki ein ish v'yishtomem, ki ein mafkia. It says in Yeshai also, Lamani Ayeser. And it's written, okay, so we brought those Pesukim. So how does one understand this? Now it's interesting because there's another Medrash, another Gemara, which says, Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Ein ben David ba The son of David won't come, Mashiach won't come. Ad shetichla malchus hazala mi-Yisrael. Who is that malchus hazala? That lowly kingdom is Rome. As it says, it brings a pasuk, and he shall sever the sprigs, the hatzalzalim, with pruning hooks. Yeshaya. Only when this world... Now, let's make it clear. The Mashiach could come in two ways. He can either come by a general improving where the culture of the world, the recognition of Hashem becomes more and more and more, or it'll go to the other extreme. Clearly, the world is not going in that first direction. The world is mitdarder, goes down and down morally every year. What happens is, there's a process called hippuch. Hippuch means that there's something called a sudden overturn, a sudden reversal. Things kind of, so to speak, they hit up against the end stop of this world. As we said, 49 is the end stop of this world. Things can't get any worse. So what happens when things reach, this is the understanding of, how do you understand the kol shekula chayev? Why should it be that Ben David should come? The Mashiach will come to a world where everybody is not deserving of his coming. And the answer is this process called hippuch. Hippuch means when something gets to the absolute end stop, it can go nowhere else, and it flips on its head to become the reverse. Moab, 49 Shari Tuma is flipped on its head, becomes David, Melech Israel. We can see this process of hippuch. I think it's a mashal that I've used here before, but we'll say it again. Let's say you were a Martian. And of course, as you know, Martians are single-cell, self-replicating organisms. They have no parents. They have no idea what childbirth is. Now, as you probably don't know as well, that Martians have extremely sophisticated telescopes. And there was a very keen Martian amateur astronomer who trained his telescope on the delivery room in Hadassah hospital out there in Kerem, and he sees this terrible, terrible, tragic scene taking place. There's this earth woman writhing around in pain, and nobody can do anything for her. And why doesn't somebody do something for her? This is the most terrible thing I've ever seen. And suddenly, in a split second, everything turns from the most terrible situation to the greatest joy that can be, with a child being born. The coming of Mashiach is known as the Ichfasa de Mashiach, the birth pangs of Mashiach. Davka, because Mashiach comes like a birth. Things get worse and worse and worse and worse until they can't get any worse. And the process of hippuch means they have to flip on their head. That's the dor shekula chayev. When everything looks its blackest, when we've nowhere to turn, when our trust in kings and presidents, when the entire moral system has broken down, that we live in a world now where what is bizarre and unnatural has become the norm, then in the flip of an eyelash, everything turns on its head. We started tonight's shiur with the pasuk. I'd like to go back now and have a look at this pasuk. Vayafoch, please look inside. Vayafoch es ha'orim. Hippuch, Hashem flipped over the ha'orim, these cities, ha'el, Vesakika, and the plain, Ves Yoshvei ha'orim, and the dwellers of the city, Vetzemach ha'adamah. We said that was redundant. You know another of the names of Mashiach? The Tzemach Tzedek. Avdi Tzemach. Tzemach is the name of the Mashiach. Clearly, I believe this is being hinted here. The birth of Moab, from whom comes David HaMelech, takes place with the hippuch of Sodom and the turning over of the Tzemach HaOdama, a hint of Mashiach. Now, it's not by coincidence that Mashiach is called a tzemach, a sprout, a plant. What happens when you grow a plant? Anybody's a botanist here or a gardener? What you do is you take seeds, right? You ever done this? And you put the seeds in the ground and the plants start to grow, correct? No, not correct. What happens when you put the seed in the ground? It rots. It rots until it's almost completely not there at all. And then there's a hippuch. Everything turns on its head. Everything turns on its head and the new life starts. That's the way Mashiach comes. That's why David HaMelech has to connect the top and the bottom. The most glorious to the most base. That's why he is the Naim Zmiris Yisrael, because he embodies music, which embodies within it the sudden reversal, the connection of the top to the bottom. That is why the true kavod can only come from the bottom, because it connects the bottom to the top. As I say, we live in an era of great confusion, great darkness, great immorality, the rejection, the negation of everything that the Torah stands for, the complete lack, as we said, of the relationship between Odom la'atzmo, man and himself, the negation of the tzuras ha'odom. If there's one bright aspect to the whole thing, is this concept of hippuch. The darker the night gets, the more we know, the closer we are to that moment when Mashiach will come, as Chazal teaches, for the darkest night, darkest hour, is just before the dawn. May he come speedily in our days. Amen.